our SterlingOSB Zero Zero to Hero Awards Night, in which we announce the winners of our annual competition, held every year with the support of our long-term sponsor, West Fraser. Inspired by this year's highly successful Paris Olympics, the brief of creating a low-carbon temporary sporting event in either London or Edinburgh for a potential Commonwealth Games was further spurred by the decision announced last year of the Australian state of Victoria to withdraw from hosting the Games. So there's a serendipity and a touch of smugness on the part of the RIBA Journal in our being able to host this awards event on the very day that the City of Glasgow has formally announced that it will be hosting the 2026 Commonwealth event. Now, some might criticise monthly journals for not being news hungry enough, but on this occasion, I'd like to think that we were conceptually bang on the button, even if 50 miles east of the eventual host city. But we'll begin this evening with the announcement of the winners of this year's Zero to Hero competition, where we will ask winners to come up, receive their award, and have a photo taken with us. Following this, we'll have a 15-minute break to recharge our glasses and avail ourselves of the nibbles on in the room next door, followed by a half-hour debate with our invited guests on a subject close to all our hearts, homes, and how we might all get one under the current government. After a brief Q&A, in which you're all invited to contribute, we'll bring our evening to a close around 8 p.m. To start with, I'd just like to introduce Claire Ironside. You there, Claire? A Zero to Hero judge and marketing executive at our commercial partner, West Fraser, without whose support we could not run this annual design competition. Claire.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming to this year's SterlingOSB Zero competition awards evening. This year's competition marks the 9th year that West Fraser has partnered with RIBA Journal in this particular competition, and my 3rd year of involvement in the judging. Each year, the brief aims to be both topical and challenging, in the hopes of inspiring a variety of interpretations. As Carlos said, the Commonwealth Games being hosted within the UK in Glasgow announced today. This year has been no different with the brief. The challenge of incorporating a sports venue into a landscape that's already filled with impressive architecture, like Edinburgh or London, provided us with a lot to consider. I'd like to thank my fellow judges, Stephen Proctor, returning once more, which we are grateful for, Sword Stott for providing insight into the world of large-scale events venues, Mark Osikoya for his guidance on the setup of a number of sports which our entrants chose to tackle that are perhaps not yet in the mainstream sporting world, but are definitely making their way into it. And of course, RIBA Journals' very own Carlos, which helped guide us through some of the judging process. And of course, thank you to some of the entrants this year's event competition, some of whom are with us in the room today. And they were able to provide some incredibly well thought out designs that challenge the way that SterlingOSB Zero can be incorporated into a meld as a sustainable alternative, both structurally and aesthetically. Now, West Fraser, as one of the world's largest lumber companies, and with 50 years of experience manufacturing in the UK, are constantly striving to support architects in their work. When specifying SterlingOSB Zero, Caber Floor, Caber MDF products, you can be sure that they are both UK made and net carbon negative. Our architect support page provides all the resources you need to source materials for your project that will help to reach your sustainability and carbon goals. Now, we have some samples that some of you may have already seen out in the room that you've been networking in. So I'll hand you back to Carlos.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire, and for your continued support. It's always a pleasure to conduct judging the West Fraser event alongside my long-term wingman, Stephen Proctor of Proctor & Matthews, who's had to leave unfortunately just now. But it allows us to see firsthand the imagination and ingenuity exhibited by our entrants, be they large urban commercial firms or tiny rural ones. Alongside Claire, our guest judge, Haward Stotter's stadium designer Populous, brought her technical expertise to the table, and Mark Ossikoya, CEO of Commonwealth Games England, clearly had skin in the game. Their input helped create a judging morning that proved no less stimulating and thought-provoking than previous ones, and I'd like to thank them all for their valuable time and input. Maybe the scale of the proposal left some readers unable to get to grips with the brief, leading to a lower number of entries than usual. But as was proved again this year, it's never about professional presentations, but communicating the germ of a great idea. If an idea is right and resonates with the judges, it might take a minimum of effort to communicate that clarity of purpose. The lesson is that crackpot proposals are welcome if you think your drawing shows you believe it. We usually will. Which brings us to the first of our long list of 4 entries that we felt merited publication despite missing out on a prize. Just to give you an idea, Francesco Couturi's project Spike was, I believe, in Riverside location, and much liked by the judges, apart from the fact that being a volleyball stadium, nobody thought, least of all Mark Ossikoya, who actually is involved in these events, it was really big enough to kind of deal with anyone on the scale that it needed to be. It's an incredibly big ticket event. So for us, it was about how they should have actually made it larger and more animated, actually. I mean, lots of criticism for some of those. We need to see the animation, especially for something like volleyball, which is, as we said, a big ticket event. The other one, Rob Pickering's Bikeathon, was a complete Heath Robinson proposal, which involved humongous, large, wheeled timber structures that looked like they almost belong from a Mad Max movie, which come together from all parts of the world, all parts of England, in order to coagulate to form a circular events stadium, which the idea which we completely loved, but obviously completely also madcap proposal, but we loved it nonetheless. So that one got longlisted. Craig Higgins' Downhill Mile was just a really great use of the material. Claire was really happy with the idea that it was incorporated within the Royal Mile at Edinburgh, using it for a very good purpose of actually creating the obstacles for urban biking. And the last one, Highland Stadium by Alex Jones, which actually Stephen Proctor really loved as an idea, because he said it was multi-facing, so you could both face inwards and outwards. You could deal with it in different ways and create different levels of engagement. But just kind of let down by a presentation that was kind of a little bit kind of dull and understated, and it could have actually been a lot more. They actually really liked that as a strong concept. So with these kind of ideas, we then kind of went on to what we were going to end up with in terms of our commendations. So now we're getting to the actual the thing where you are actually going to be receiving prizes. So these ones, yes, come to our commended entries, all winning a £500 prize. The first one that wins was London Skeet by Dominic Cox and Florence Shitemu of Vector Projects Kenya. With the Paris Olympics shooting events held in a medieval French estate, Cox's argument for his urban East End London shooting event space was founded in the idea of shooting as a privileged rural pastime, in antithesis to the urban perception of guns being read as part of a wider, fear-filled criminal narrative. Claire Ironside felt the project to be using their SterlingOSB Zero effectively, while Haward Stock appreciated the design form as working well for viewers, even if his canopy was fully transparent. Commonwealth Games CEO Mark Ossikoya appreciated the idea of taking an elitist sport into areas that are not elitist and making that a key focus. For the clarity of the narrative and effectiveness of visual communication, we were very happy to commend this project with its £500 prize. Dom and Florence, living in Kenya, clearly are not here to be able to accept their prize, but we will be informing them later tonight. But please give them a round of applause for their first. Our second commended winner is Sport Holder number 1 by Cashton Brown Architects. Cashton Brown's reimagining of a Victorian gas holder in London inspired the judges with its idea of an urban gladiatorial space. 12 tiers of timber trussed OSB seating direct the audience to a central 20-metre stage, suitable for a number of spectator sports. Covered with a PTFE canopy, the judges felt it to be grand and romantic as a proposal. RCKa noted that this would be a stunning backdrop to sports, usually held in windowless halls, while Stott noted that they could easily be blacked out for TV purposes and the seat rate made steeper for greater drama. All the judges appreciated bigger ideas of reuse in an urban context, and with 19th century gas holders a firm fixture of the UK's great industrial cities, realised the potential for this proposition to possibly move and generate possibilities for sporting action and involvement across the country. And for this reason, Cashton Brown Architects are our second £500 commended winner. Would the representative like to come up?
Thank you. Yes, what to say about it? I guess the main thing really is about being inspired by this very iconic structure, which of course was built as a very solid and braced guide to allow the telescopic gas tanks to rise up inside it. And our idea here was to use that for its structural purpose, and therefore the canopy over the top of this arena for the combat sports we've talked about being used in here would be hoisted up on cables using the full height of that 40-odd metre high structure in there. So putting it back to a true use to guide an element within that for the purposes of this. Rather than, I think, the fate of many of these gas holders around the country at the moment, which is rather unfortunately to be filled with a large number of flats, which appear to have been shoehorned inside a structure like this, while the structure itself has become completely redundant. And of course, arranging those flats, a very circular arrangement, has its challenges as well, particularly fitting tables into the corners and so on. So we felt this was a much more fitting use for that particularly iconic structure.
Oh, well, thank you, Julie. It's a great example of reuse, temporary reuse as well. So well done. Congratulations. And our third winner, commended winner, is Transformational Venue by Woo Architects. Woo Architects could hardly have picked a more dramatic or politically loaded context than Aston Webb's Admiralty Arch in London, itself epitomising the architecture of empire. But here, its position at the end of the long run of the Mall makes it the perfect start or end point for any number of city-based sport events. Using its curve as a springboard for a massive circular spectator structure, Woo cleverly articulated how the form could be used to host athletics, cycling events, a marathon, court sports, simply by opening and closing the form and utilising its levels above ground. The judges were impressed by the thoroughness of thinking that yielded so many possibilities. Stephen Proctor, in addition, enjoyed its diffusion of colonial architecture, while RCKa remarked that it progressed what the modern-day Commonwealth represents, addressing in a small way its colonial past. So I don't know if Woo are here. Are you here, Woo? Where are you? Matthew Walker, Helen Wilson, Kevin Owens. Come up to receive your award. Thank you. Congratulations.
Hello. Yes, so just briefly about this. We're sports architects, actually. Helen has just finished working on Paris 2024 and is now working on LA. So we're very conscious of the challenges that big games events have. and what we were trying to do was trying to make an event that was scalable and very much focused on the spectacle and the event and also the view out. And there's been a big move towards having the best broadcast ability for your sports and to have them in central locations and as close to the action of big cities as possible, as well as having flexible venues that can host more than one sport. Currently trying to tackle those exact issues now with trying to make it as efficient as possible so that you can host multiple sports. We've given ourselves a bit of grace here, but we think that there is the opportunity to have a smaller venue that's easier to build and is modular, that allows for quick changes to allow for the big spectacle events, final of the marathon, the start or the transition period of the triathlon, some of these kind of, the final event of a squash tournament, for instance, could happen sequentially in the same venue over time. And then, yeah, that's what it is.
Congratulations. And it's completely transformational. It's a great project. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. And now to our winner. The winning project won because the more we returned to it, the cleverer we realised it was. Proposition not only activated an underused empty site between London buildings, but used the buildings around it to parasitically attach so as to gain structural purchase from them. This project was not only about the sport itself, urban climbing, for which it created a dramatic climbing wall against another tower with an integrated bank of leaderboards and huge TV screens. It also intelligently considered the needs of the viewers and how they might best view such a sport. Here, a steep SterlingOSB Zero ziggurat of terraces sits opposite but in great proximity to the climbing wall, allowing viewers direct visual access to the sport from all levels, with hospitality, lifts and toilets set beneath them. The relationship between the two seems to create for the judges a thrilling and vertiginous space that almost brings the action straight to the spectator. Claire Ironside imagined the excitement of walking into the street that housed it, while Stephen Proctor acknowledged that it turned a nondescript urban space into a pure event. Science Stop, meantime, who really championed the proposal, said she'd never seen a spectator proposition like it so uniquely suited to the sport it was supposed to be viewing. It's for all these reasons that RIBAJ and West Fraser are happy to give Zero to Heroes first place and the £2,500 prize to Julian Evans and Sean Briggs of Archio Architecture. Are you there? Congratulations, well done. Congratulations. Lovely project.
Well, I should be watching Brian versus Wolves tonight. I suppose it's a slightly better alternative. We're normally quite technical architects, so when we read the brief for this and it said use your imagination, go mad, I think we went slightly mad. However, what we also did was we started using the playbook, sort of reverting back to our childhood with slot A versus slot B, slotting everything together, and before you know it, you've got this stack of cards effect going on. And if you ever go down to the site, you'll realise that it'll be perfect where it is, because right opposite you can see a lovely view of the Shard. So we afford rock climbing, up the buildings, away you go. That's it, really.
Congratulations, it was a great idea. And so Edinburgh from Populous was really impressed by just how kind of, how it used everything really well. It used other structures in order to kind of gain its support thoroughly, but also that it completely thought about the viewers and how it would be a spectator experience as well as for the people who were actually doing the sport itself. It was a great little project. Thank you very much.
Don't know with this, but let's go.
Yeah, no, vertiginous was a key word there, but that's part of the thrill. Anyway, come on over. Well done. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations. So we thought given the fact we now have a new administration, and with the idea that 1.5 million homes are mandated to be built within the term of the new government, we want to ask exactly how that can be achieved. We've got Rachel Reeves' plan for growth predicated on the release of Grey Belt within the Green Belt, or Grey Field within the Green Belt, and we'd like to know what the implications of planning to enable this could be, and what the ramifications of it are. Will changes in policy overcome long-held incidents of land banking by house builders, or free up councils to build their own social housing without massive extra capital funding? Can Reeves' desire to realise all of this with the private sector ever work? And to help answer this, we've got 3 experts here. To my left, Russell Curtis, who's founding director of RCKa, an architectural practice specialising in residential, community and public buildings. They've won 4 housing design awards, RIBA Journals and Curran Award, been twice named Social Value Architect of the Year, and he's also a member of the LLDC Quality Review Panel and Newham's Design Review Panel, and chair of Barnett's Quality Review Panel. And given that I'm a resident of Barnet, I'm really keen on that last one. And his research into urban golf courses, Grey Belt, and developing around rural stations has received national media attention with several appearances on BBC TV and radio talking about his work. To his left, we have Oliver Bulleid, or Bulleid, I don't know if it's the German or the, yeah, Oliver Bulleid, Chief Executive of London Community Land Trust. He oversees all projects and campaigns for new housing. His background as an architect with specialist knowledge in housing and low energy design provides invaluable technical expertise and practical knowledge. He's worked on a wide range of award-winning projects, from large-scale master plans and housing, with projects in many London boroughs, including Euroco House for Coin Street Community Builders, Somerleyton Road Community Housing for Brixton Green, London Borough of Lambeth. And he's also worked with Archio in Lewisham on Citizens House. And to his left is Archio co-director Mellis Haward. She is one of the UK's leading voices on co-design and affordable housing, and worked on innovative projects including London's first purpose community land trust housing, Citizens House, with Oliver, Angel Yard, Norwich, an intergenerational co-housing scheme for Town. Archio create buildings, places and strategies for local authority regeneration companies, housing associations, select private developers, co-housing and community-led groups. They're the authors of the Co-Design Toolkit and Collective Action, the Power of Collaboration and Co-Design in Architecture. Archio was also awarded Best Housing in the AJ Awards and Best Community Engagement Outcomes at the London Planning Awards 2023. Welcome all of you. Thank you for coming. Yes, with the new Labour administration mandating 1.5 million homes to be built in this term, how will this be achieved? I did kind of like send some questions round to you. So we're going to start with those in a round robin form, maybe. May as well start with those. Russell, 300k homes per year is a tall order, given that we haven't hit those kind of figures since the council house building programme was still being enacted. How realisable do you think this will be now in the current financial climate?
Thank you. Well, it's actually 370,000 a year at the moment, partly because the government knows it's not going to hit anywhere near that target for some time. And to be honest, I'm not sure it is achievable. It's not really a planning issue, although planning is part of the problem. We just don't have the capacity in the country to deliver that kind of volume, which is the biggest issue. I think in the last 10 years, the average age of people involved in the construction industry has increased by 10 years. So we don't have enough labour coming into the market in order to deliver that. But putting that to one side for a second, the Labour Party is making a big deal about things like Grey Belt and new towns. The new towns programme there's no chance of that delivering anywhere near that kind of number of homes within the next 5 years. It's a 5 to 10 year at least programme. So we need to be looking elsewhere. Grey Belt, I think, probably is part of the answer, but I'm also hoping that they'll be doing a bit more around suburban intensification, particularly. I've had meetings with MHCLG in the last few weeks about this, and they're seriously looking at ways in which we can deliver homes through gradual intensification rather than large-scale regeneration projects, which tend to rely on large house builders. So I think, quite how we do that, I'm not sure, but it's an interesting proposition.
Is there no capacity, say, with the David Rudlin idea of kind of extending out kind of mini new towns kind of on the outskirts of larger cities?
There's quite a lot of that happening. I think, particularly in the home counties, we're working for Crown Estate at the moment, a big master plan in East Temple, and that's 4,000 homes. So those things are going to happen, but it's not going to be in the next 5 years. I mean, the master plan is going to take a year. It's then going to be adopted in planning. That's an outline application, so you think, but we're in reserve maths applications to come through. So, and then you've got contractors and developers to bring on board. So there's no way that we're going to be able to deliver that meaningfully in the next 5 years. And that's even when you ignore the fact that there's lots of infrastructure missing in these places as well. So the infrastructure will take years. So I just don't think that we can deliver projects of that, or housing of that kind of scale, through even sort of large expansions of existing settlements. It has to be done through. Well, what we have to do, and the fundamental issue I think in this country, is small-scale developers. Our small-scale developer industry has absolutely collapsed in the last 20 or 30 years. We need to reinvigorate that, but in order to do that, we have to give them certainty on the outcomes. And so I think the planning reform certainly is a barrier to that.
Yeah, you're a real pro there, Russell. That's a total segue to my next question, which is to Oliver, which is, with the scale of the announced house building programme by government, do you think that the only way to achieve it is by being in alliance with volume house builders? I mean, I'm just specifically looking at the recent stuff about Maid and Lloyd's with Barratt and Homes England. So, are we just going back to default?
Yeah, I think you need to turn that question on its head a little bit and say, well, who are the homes for? How good are they? What are we trying to do? And if you have a very limited supply, but of not very good quality, and built to sell fast but not maintain long term, you get what you get. And knock-ons from all of that are that you get relatively poor quality homes, a lot of objections, very long planning journey, and people who are effectively NIMBYs through the process. And house builders are, they're for profit companies. They need to make a profit. Their model is very simple. They have a relatively restricted supply, and then they can make a good profit. They also have to limit the release of their homes as well. So they won't be building 1,000 homes in a go and selling 1,000 in a go. They'll be releasing 100 here and 50 there. So in that context, yes, they're part of the solution, but they're not the whole solution. And going back to Russell's point of the only time we've ever achieved the numbers is when the state was building considerably. So I just looked at some figures earlier and statistics and the rest of it. But we've only ever built 300,000 homes in the 6 years between, I think, 1965 and 1969, something like that. So that's in the last 120 years. And then more recently, in the last 20 years, I think in 2000, the figures went down to about 120,000. And that's with everyone combined. So in terms of the numbers, the state builds about, the private sector builds about between 150 and maybe up to 200,000 homes per year at best. So the big question is, well, where does that extra 150 or 100,000 homes come from? At the moment, the state isn't building at any numbers really. It's 5,000 to 10,000 homes a year, albeit trying to gear up. Local authorities are trying to gear up to the number of homes. Housing associations are providing between 20 and 30,000 homes a year. So there's a gap. And the question is, and again going back to Russell's point about small and medium developers, and also we need small and medium builders as well to be able to come into the market. So there is a potential, and this is where I plug community land trusts, there's a potential for community land trusts to come in to that zone and be developers, small and medium scale developers. And in that context, we're not dissimilar to housing associations when they started about 50 or so years ago. They started very small and they were only building a few hundred, a few thousand homes a year. And they're now building considerably more. They've got their own problems in terms of stock and repairs and things. But there is, I think, a huge potential for different models to come forward, which are, rather than having poor quality, high sale factors behind them, which are for-profit developers. You look at a long-term sustainable development, which has community support. And then to give an example of our Citizens House project with Archio, rather than having a whole lot of objections, I think we had one objection and over 100 letters of support about planning. And so I think that then demonstrates that you have that level of support, you're probably doing something quite well.
Mellis, when we were talking around the idea, you were kind of very keen about talking about your experience rather than kind of the broader issue. You know, we had our original chat. I mean, clearly you've got direct experience with Citizens House and working with London CFC. How do you feel that, I mean, given budgets and the proposed speed of delivery, how do we keep the time, cost, quality triangle skewed in favour of quality? Because you seemed quite keen to kind of emphasise that aspect about it.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we champion quality in the race for numbers. I've been really thinking recently about what is the definition of quality in this race for numbers, who holds that vision and who's delivering on that. And I think it comes down to a few things. I think, picking up on what Russell said, I think in this race for housing numbers we need to think about where homes are placed. I'm a bit nervous about this conversation about grey belt or grey, whatever it is. Because I think that a lot of those sites are really badly located without sustainable travel links, and we're just sort of exacerbating some of the long-term problems about bad quality homes. So I'm also quite an advocate of densifying suburban areas, thinking about attaching to existing places, but looking for quality there. And also I think that there's an important distinction between quality of the final product and quality of the place you're making. And I think that in delivering numbers, we're not talking about neighbourhoods, communities, etc. And I think what we need in order to make that happen is to have really strong leaders in terms of the vision for places, whether it's large-scale redevelopment or the kind of systems in place for delivering high-quality densification. And I also, just preparing my notes, I also think one of the keys to that seems to be it's hard to rely on the kind of vision. I mean, actually, Jeremy from Human Nature is here, and I think they're delivering something quite unusual, which is developer-led visionary house building. It's very unusual. And I think where I think this all points towards is the kind of joint partnerships between local authorities and developers, where the local authority has a long-term interest in a place, and they can set some of the long-term objectives, what quality means for them, and hold their kind of financiers, their partners, to those key criteria of quality. I think where we leave land for the house builder, no one's holding on to what quality is, and right down to the kind of DMV contract, can't think of a not rude word. Everything just gets down, plummeted to the worst quality. No one cares. In fact, I had a really interesting conversation with quite a few developers yesterday, where one of the key problems with delivering quality is that the clerk works on site don't care. They just want to get the job done for the same contractor, working through multiple sites. And I just think we haven't got this kind of golden thread of quality that we need to be delivering homes. And as someone who's also working on retrofit at scale, I think we're just delivering ourselves problems down the line. So that's why I'm in this resurgence of housing delivery, I'd be happy to be always talking about quality in the face of this.
Thank you. I mean, I know that you've done some stuff, Russell, on Twitter where you've been, you've certainly been kind of retorting to some people who've been making criticisms about what you've been saying about the Grey Belt. But I suppose it just raises concerns about how centralised this process of delivery is going to be. anyway, and how much communities should be involved. So my next question is, given the centralised nature of the government's aim to realise growth in the sites in the Green Belt, how easily do you think that this sits with concepts of local democracy and community empowerment? Because they always get to buy in, but...
Yeah, it's a really good question. This is one that I really grapple with. I had a conversation about this very topic last night. And I think that the big problem that we have is that the big problem we have with planning is that people, citizens, don't engage with it until somebody puts a planning application in for developing the end of their garden. And it's too late. And what we should be doing is we should be engaging with, and this is getting technical planning now, but we should be finding ways to engage people with the local plan process. Because the local plan process is the thing that sets up all of the local plan policy. And if people interact with that and engage with it and have a positive discussion about it, and I think Labour is right. We need to stop talking about if we build homes and start talking about how we do it. Because we do need them. I mean, I just don't buy this argument that we don't need to be delivering homes. That there's, we've got far too many empty homes. There are empty homes, but there's not really that many as a proportion of our total housing stock. We need to be talking about how we do it. And how we do it is positively engaging people in the local plan-making process, so they can have an influence over where these homes are eventually delivered within their neighbourhoods. And perhaps then also have a conversation about what they might look like, because there are ways of encoding, or through design codes, there are ways of making sure that these homes fit with local character or prevailing densities or whatever. So there are ways that we can do that. The trouble is it's so impenetrable as a process that people just switch off or are not aware that this thing is going on, or it's just too convoluted, too difficult. So we really need to find a way of democratising the local plan-making process.
But how do you imagine that? I mean, you're talking about kind of the high level looking down, really, from kind of looking at central government making an edict, really, and you're trying to work out how can that be managed at kind of a structural level. You've got Mellis who's sitting there making, amongst the garages before they ever built Citizen's House with a cookie cutter kind of, making models, asking the local community, how high do you want your building? How high do you want the building? Where's the sweet spot between complete engagement with the local community on site and a directive about how one kind of better involves the community in the local plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know quite a lot. I have a healthy interest in planning, and even I find it almost impossible to find stuff on local authority websites. I mean, you should just be able to go to the website, have a look at a map and see what's proposed, click on it, find things. But I mean, has anybody ever tried finding a planning application on Islington's website? I mean, it is just lists of random numbers, and you have to click on every single one to find, sort of basement plan or whatever it is. It's absolutely hopeless. So I would say, well, the government needs to be putting massive investment into a common planning system. Why haven't we got a common planning system?
The planning portal was supposed to be the start of that, wasn't it?
It's privatised. I mean, they've got all the data, but it's a private company, and they now charge you to put a planning application in, and they hold all of that data, and they don't make any. They monetise it. It's an absolute nonsense. I'm not sort of, I'm not a free market economist. I'm not, suggesting that absolutely everything needs to be public. It needs to be belong to the state. But that seems fundamental to me that we don't have a decent system where you could, Dropbox. You can go to see PDFs and stuff. How can you see a PDF on most planning boards? Most local authorities don't even have a map. They have a mapping system. Madness.
Well, also the local plan as opposed to the supplementary planning guidance and new planning guidance in consultation. And to people who don't know how to navigate that, it is just
impossible.
Throwing yourself into an ocean of information that you have no control over. Yeah. Oliver, what would you want to see, well actually this goes back to planning, what would you want to see change in terms of the release of council-owned land and planning concessions to community land trusts to allow them to get involved at scale in the housing delivery they so want?
Yeah, I think slightly in defence of local authorities here, Southwark have recently completed what's called the Southwark Land Commission. I don't know if any of you are aware of it, but effectively it's a kind of review of their land holdings. They own about 30% of the borough, and they're looking at what they're doing well, what they're doing not so well. And we forget that local authorities manage things like parks and schools and things, and generally we quite like that. The thing that we feel a bit more challenged about is new housing delivery and also what to do with bits of land within that. The Southwark Land Commission did recognise that other types of, they recognise in fact a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, more engagement with the community, developing a better plan, looking at how assets are managed, and I hate the term, but councils always use the term disposal of sites as though it's getting rid of it in some underhand way. It's not. These are public assets which, if they're not being developed by a council, if they're not being managed by a council or by the GLA or TfL or the NHS or others, there should be a plan for them. And if there isn't a plan, you kind of think, well, why not? And that plan could be do nothing, turn it into a nature reserve or let it be whatever. But if there's a plan for a local authority to bring forward housing, which is in desperately short supply in London, and the council doesn't have the means to do that because they're focusing on larger scale estate regeneration or other things, generally councils are underfunded, under-resourced, have problems, then they should look for other alternatives. But I think the worst alternative there is to flog it to the private sector in a fire sale because you need a few quid to keep your schools open or whatever it is. Because then you've lost that public asset for good. And you might in return get a few affordable homes in the bottom left-hand corner around the back where the bins are. And you sort of think that's okay. It's not okay. These are public assets that we should be retaining in perpetuity for the public good and then working out how to do it. And in that context, something like a community land trust is a pretty good bet. You have the community involved, homes are available at affordable levels in perpetuity. The community is interested and invested in the long-term stewardship of that proposal. So my thinking is that if a council isn't able to bring forward a site within, say, 3 or 4 or 5 years, there should be some sort of stipulation, and they've identified it for housing development, or for any development, there should be something that says no, they have to offer it for community-led development. It seems pretty clear.
So then how do you activate local community to create the trust to kind of go forward and...
Well, I think going back to my first point, if you're putting forward something good where the community benefits from it, if you think about a large-scale private-led project, there's not much for the community in there. What do? You take away daylight and sunlight from existing homes. You generally overdevelop a site because that site has been flipped 4 or 5 times. So what was originally sort of 5 stories is now 8 stories. And what do you get in return? The private developer has to provide some affordable homes. Some will be at shared ownership, which are not affordable to an average income. Yeah. And then there'll be some social rent homes, which may or may not be provided on site. So it's not a very good deal in terms of a site being brought forward by the private sector. So my view is that, yeah, you bring forward something which does have something to offer to the local community. And then you'll get support, and if that's local homes for local people. So, we have a shortage. I mean, look at our schools at the moment. Primary school numbers are dropping, secondary school numbers are dropping. The only reason that's happening in London, well, it's Brexit as well, but I won't go into Brexit. The school numbers are dropping because homes are unaffordable in London. So that's the kind of canary in the coal mine scenario. That's effectively an early warning system to us that there's a massive problem, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So we need generally affordable homes for local people. Otherwise, everyone's key workers are going to be living 100 miles away and travelling 2 hours on the train. Do we want that for our city? So, but going back, people are supportive of. You'll campaign for it, and that's where you get 100 letters of support for planning application, rather than 100 letters of rejection.
Can I just make a quick point about this idea of local democracy? Because we need to be very careful when we talk about local democracy and local freedoms, because if you're a single mum bringing up a family in temporary accommodation, you are not going to engage with the planning system. If you're a retired couple rattling around in a 4-bed house, you are going to. And I think we need to find ways to engage a much wider demographic in the planning system, because it is dominated, objections are dominated by people who have plenty of time and resources and the intellectual capacity to engage with this stuff. So it just doesn't feel like it's a sort of symmetrical system at the moment.
I mean, that's kind of talking about the sense of a kind of open democracy, effectively, where, as you say, it's not about just about vested interests, it's about giving people a voice who don't have one currently.
That's just also coming, sorry, I'm butting in so now. I think if we're doing something good, people would want it. That seems pretty obvious. So I know change is difficult, and perhaps if you're sitting in a big country mansion and got a development happening, you might not want it. But I think for the majority of us, if the change is represented correctly for the benefit that it has, that might mean, for instance, new people come in and the store numbers go up. You might add another classroom to the store, you get better education, you might get better shopping facilities, you might get a new health centre. There's a whole load of benefits that come in, as well as, and I think we're very bad at representing the benefits that come in. And I think the primary reason for that is we've built really bad stuff for the last 50 years. And we've built a bunch of cul-de-sacs with a whole load of turning circles with rubbish trucks and bins, with tiny front gardens and tiny back gardens and lots of external walls. And that's a massive problem. And yes, some people like living in those homes. I mean, they're probably great, I don't have a problem with them. But the majority of people who are objecting to them are objecting because generally it's not really about making great places that are going to last for hundreds of years. And I think we should be looking to do that, build really good quality long-term future.
I mean, Mellis, you were going back to the idea of kind of how you engage with people. How do we ensure that end user and wider community needs don't get sidelined in the drive to deliver housing at scale? I mean, you kind of worked completely ground up when you were working at Citizens House. It was literally from first principles engaging with people. How do you feel that the broader agenda by central government kind of create this 1.5 million, which you've agreed is probably unachievable, but it remains an aim, and therefore how does one reconcile that with communities, existing communities, and empowerment of people who are disempowered?
I really agree with both points about engaging the communities and the planning system. I think that's fundamental, but I think we have to approach it at two scales. I think the government has tried to bring in local design codes and people to be working on those to sort of bring in that community voice. But I do think it does suffer from the time-rich, time-poor situation. And so I think that we should focus the design code conversations on what are the broader benefits and how do we allocate land for particular uses. I think the problem is land at the moment is basically allocated to the highest bidder. So coming on to Oliver's point, there's no room for community groups, interesting affordable housing delivery, SME developers. So I think the design code maybe should take its focus away from what things look like, but what things are there, what's the vision for this place. I think it could be somewhere between what you were talking about in terms of people engaging with the local plan and what Southwark's doing with its land. But I think there's another point. A lot of the work that we've done has been little bits of funding for community groups to make things happen have been absolutely fundamental. And I think with the community-led housing fund sort of disappearing, that's a real danger. I mean, I'm thinking about our project in Greenwich. We had a tiny bit of funding via Create Streets randomly to do some workshops, and also thinking again about the voice of the community in projects like, sorry Jeremy, I keep it in Lewis, and I'm thinking about a project with Stories developers, Mayday, Saxonvale, I think it's called. It's all about bits of funding to make the communities be able to demonstrate an alternative model to the status quo. And so I think there's the sort of grassroots aspect that needs to be funded. And then there's a conversation about what is the agency for communities in these decisions. I think that it's a tall order to ask anyone to even look at a local plan, even if the website's amazing. And I think what we need to be asking is more pointed questions about what's the land used for, because then you get long-term agency buy-in from community. Okay, 10 years ago I helped that land be allocated for this use. Right now I'm really interested in it. I think that, I mean, I don't comment on the local plan for Hackney, even though I live there and I work there. You know, it's bamboozling scale. So I think we need to rethink how we think about design codes, because they just seem just a bit about pitched roofs or not pitched roofs, in my opinion.
Do you think it's anything as simple as kind of just engaging local communities by saying, look, we have a site here, what do we think should happen to it? We all live around it, we all walk past it, it's fenced off, what should happen to it?
But that's a difficult conversation, because probably 10 years ago it was allocated for something, and like you say, the council's losing money and they need to sell it to the highest bidder. So that's a big conversation, but and often most people will say, oh, a park, you know. So I think it's about, I hate the phrase capacity building, getting people to understand really what's at stake, that we do need. And what we did at Citizens House was say, we really need these houses. Think about the people you might know who might want to live in these affordable homes. So turning the conversation into truly the benefits of regeneration, not development.
So obviously, I mean, clearly a big issue, contentious. I don't know if anybody's got any, does anybody want to, oh, right, hands. I don't know if we have a roving, well, let's start with Carlos and Jan. Start and I'll work that. Oh, no, just...
Hi. So, kind of burning question, really. So I was really interested about this talk tonight and sort of thinking about sustainability. And I think the comment that you're saying there wasn't any, vacant housing wasn't a thing. Well, certainly from the numbers I've looked at for the last census, plus the sort of Scottish information, you know, it's 1.5 million vacant dwellings that could be refurbished, not all of them, obviously. It's not as simple as that, but and also the issue of not only vacant dwellings, which obviously kind of contribute to communities breaking down a bit because, you know, they're not kind of full community, but also vacant office buildings, of which there's a huge, I think it's 10 million square metres of floor space, which would, not all of it could be converted, but it could, you know, a lot of it could be converted, and also
help a certain level of conversion.
Yeah, it helps to revitalise existing communities rather than trying to create new communities. Mm. And also shops, you know, high streets having live-work units there, you know, there's 1 in 7 shops gone now. So actually, when you add them all up, that's massive. You know, that would go a huge way towards 1.5 million homes. Of course, it's not straightforward because it's not mass building, but it actually is a lot more sustainable as well. You know, the carbon footprint of a refurbishment compared to new build is a lot smaller. So, you know, surely the question should be about looking at what's gone wrong and how to the identification of suburbia. Yeah, that's great as well, but it's kind of more deep than that, I think.
Can I answer that, Carlos?
Yeah.
I really agree with you, and I think that the answer to the housing crisis is not just new build. I think it's a sort of systematic review of everything that's happening, and we're working, for instance, with Sheffield Community Land Trust on multiple sites in the city centre, because it's a city that's really struggled with closing department stores, shops of scale. And so we're looking at exactly that, live-work units, co-working spaces, etc. It's a real challenge financially, actually, it's cheaper to build a new build, like, so much cheaper. So it's really hard to be doing these things. And it is more sustainable in the initial, like, embodied energy conversation, and obviously we need to do something. But it's turning out to be sort of more expensive and marginally less embodied energy. I mean, this is the reality of it, although it seems that, and this is just my one project over 17 sites, but we are analysing at that scale. I think there's a real trick, and in fact, coming back to Southwark Council, there's a councillor called Leo Pollack who's doing amazing work looking at, like, essentially over and under occupation of homes. And I think across the country, really forward-thinking housing associations are building a lot more older people's homes in order to create like, sort of seductive places for people to downsize to free up family homes. And I think that kind of...
Philip's doing it in Southwark as well.
Yeah. And there's the one I'm thinking of is Phoenix Housing Association, which is doing a lot of that. And I mean, they also employ really interesting designers, so I'm thinking of them. But I totally agree, and I think it's a multitude of approaches. I mean, maybe today we're just talking about predominantly new build housing, because that's one nut to crack. But I really agree that there's a multi-layered approach, but unfortunately, I don't think that the redeveloping existing offices is as easy or as simple as it might seem, basically. But I've done one project on that. So.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much. I thought it was a really interesting talk and a good debate. And you just touched upon the question I was going to ask, actually, because you talk about kind of housing delivery, but it's about the right homes in the right places for the right people. And there was a really interesting article on BBC Radio 4, the Today programme, about the primary school places, and about how there's a kind of a reduction in primary school pupils within London because people are moving out. But actually, is that not about the fact that we're delivering 1- and 2-bed homes and studios because the market forces are really pushing in that direction? And actually, should we be providing homes for later living, and also should we be providing the right kind of family homes to keep people in the communities that they are? And I guess that then also leads into another question that I had, because ultimately, if you are going to build this multitude of homes in such a short space of time, how can we rely on smaller house builders and SMEs to be able to get through the hurdles of biodiversity net gain, Building Safety Act, some of these real big bureaucratic hurdles that you've got to go through, which are expensive and time consuming to overcome in order to be able to get those homes built.
I'd like to come in there as an architect and community developer. So, simple things. Development is about land and money. And unfortunately, we don't have much access to land. It's all stitched up, basically, as a result of centuries of our country's history. Let's not go there. And then money as well. So at the moment, for example, grant funding for affordable housing is done per unit. I hate the term unit, but that's what's used. So you get the same amount of grant funding, whether it's a 1-bedroom home or a 4-bedroom home, which seems crazy. And apparently the argument is that it's just done on an aggregate, and therefore it sort of works itself out around it. It doesn't. Because projects are unviable financially if they have larger homes in them. And so there's always the push down towards smaller homes. And that's something that we have to deal with as well. But fundamentally it's because the grant system is skewed in favour of smaller developments. And then the market is skewed in favour of smaller developments as well. So I think we, as a society, need to think, well, what is it that we want? What do we need? And then that also then is in terms of the affordability of those. Well, if a private-led development has 65% of the homes as a minimum, it's probably often more in terms of viability argument transport, 65% of those homes are hugely unaffordable, more than hugely unaffordable to anyone on an average salary in London. The only way you can afford one of those homes if you've inherited several £100,000 and you have a 100,000 plus income. That's the only way you can afford one of those market sale homes as a young adult, so you're starting out in employment. So what do we do to address that? I think that's we need some land in order to bring forward community-led homes. That's our selfish need, if you like, community. But we do need money, we need government support. And I think then you need to think about housing as infrastructure. You can think of housing as critical infrastructure, you invest in it in the long term, and you borrow it for the long term. So social housing in the 1960s, as far as I'm aware, has paid for itself. Those loans have been paid off. So it's doable if you can borrow money at low interest rates over 60 years or so. So there are means to do it, but I think none of our political parties seem to have the capacity or the sales power to be able to say, this is what we need to do.
So is that a return to build to rent, or build to rent for social purpose rather than for private enterprise?
I think we need everything. At the moment, the focus is very much about social rent, because each council in London has well over 10,000 people on the council waiting list.
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, there's
really interesting point here about planning policy. Sorry, we're back to planning policy. But in 2016, Croydon introduced a small site, suburban intensification SPD. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And it was extremely successful. And basically, it allowed people, or set out a series of parameters by which developers could buy properties and then intensify those plots. In a 3 or 4 year period after that was introduced, Croydon delivered something like 2,000 homes on small sites below 10 homes, so minor schemes. And we know from the data there that house prices and rents levelled off in the areas where it was brought in. It was scrapped by an incoming Tory mayor. So we know that if you introduce, and also what's interesting about that is it was, because it was delivering, it was also a large proportion of family homes. So there are really lovely examples of sprawling sort of 4 or 5 bedroom houses which are woefully inefficient in terms of their thermal performance, replaced with 5, 6, 7 family homes. So it can be done. So what we need is that kind of initiative at scale, because those policies tend to deliver larger family dwellings, but also because the small scale developers have the certainty of the outcome, because it basically says in the guide, if you do this, you will get planning permission. And therefore, it sort of reinvigorates that small scale developer market, and also they're also very reliant on local supply chains, local economic improvements, upskilling, all of that sort of thing.
We have time for 1 or 2, yes.
Yeah. I'm just looking out at Centre Point, and I think it's got about 5 lights on, and it's 82 homes, starting at 3.5 million, going up to 8 million. We've built tons of homes in London over the last 20 years, but they're there to warehouse capital, not for people to live in. And whether it's a wealth tax on second homes or unoccupied homes, we have the homes already, but it's all about what those homes are for. And as because homes have become commodities, and people are talking about public housing, but if we don't go back to what society and socialism means, and home as being a basic human right, it's not a commodity, it's your nest egg you give to your children, and we won't ever solve this problem.
That's exactly what Oliver works on every day, that we worked on Citizens House. So Citizens House were 11 homes sold in relation to local earnings, totally detached from the market value. They're held in trust in perpetuity to be sold at those affordable discount market sales forever. And I suppose that's all I can say in response to that. I totally agree. I think that the fundamental fact that homes are being sort of land banked to make value, but not being homes, is exactly what we work on every day to try and...
And it's also full of people that simply cannot believe that they're still in their own borough, near their homes, near the schools that they grew up in, they just don't believe it. They're all wandering around with smiles on their faces. They don't quite know how it happened. It's amazing.
2/3 of the residents there are key workers as well, so they're providing an essential service to keep our city going.
I know you're using Centre Point to make a point. I mean, Centre Point is a bit of a basket case, because they're not been sold off to overseas developers. They've not been sold off at all because they pulled them all off the market because they couldn't get the values they wanted, and now the county can afford to do that. So it's a slight anomaly, but your point is absolutely right.
We'll take one more question. We'll take this gentleman here. Sorry, there at the back. I don't know if we have time.
Sorry. I agree with Mellis's comment, by the way, about design and build, which well-known acronym of D&B, dead and buried. I think I agree that it needs a fundamental shake-up in government thinking. The one I'm red hot on really is the bedroom tax, which I think is absolutely Dickensian. I mean, it's punitive, and Michael Rosen recently wrote in The Guardian that a mother lost her son and was then charged 14% against her universal credit because she had a spare bedroom. And, you know, I write letters, I'm a Labour Party member, I write to Keir Starmer, I don't get any reply, you know. It should be abolished. It is criminal, you know, it's Dickensian, isn't it? You know, let's face it, it is. And, you know, if we go back to the halcyon days of the 60s and 70s of the housing corporations, it was properly funded in those days, wasn't it? I live in a 60s house which is designed by Pippin Randall Park in the late 60s in Lewis, and it was designed, you know, using the Park Morris standards. It's not great it's not great building actually. It's a well-equipped building, but it allowed people to get a foot on the ladder in those days. And you know, when I think I bought my first one for 26,250, now it's worth 450k. You know. And that's not that, it's only since 83, you know. So I really think architects should really put pressure on the government, because there's been so much laxity over the last 14 years. And they've been allowed to get away with a lot of the Tories, particularly the bedroom tax. So, you know, my clarion call is that architects really need to put pressure on and get back, you know, to, you know, stop all this D&B nonsense.
I think you're overestimating the amount of influence we have on government. I would love it if we had any kind of say on it.
I would like to say that if we provided really good quality housing for elder people, they would move into it and free up homes which are under-occupied.
Yeah.
But we don't.
No.
And so I think there's a kind of, again, it's a societal issue. How do we provide really good quality homes for people as they get older?
On that point, and sorry to bring it back to planning again, but one of the big issues is we don't have a planning use class for older person's housing.
No.
So, you know, so older person's housing is treated and intergenerational housing is treated exactly the same way as normal C3 residential housing. So it's a big issue.
Use class for live work either, do you?
No, because in a lot of places, if you go to speak to Lewisham Council, they say live work doesn't exist, it's just live. So people buy it who can afford it and then just convert the workspaces into living spaces. So there are some challenges around that. How do you enforce the fact that it's work as well as live?
Yeah.
But definitely, I think, you know, our later living sector in this country is very immature, if excuse the pun. But we haven't really got to grips with codifying later living as a positive choice for people to move into an earlier age rather than a sort of end-of-life inevitability.
Well, thank you very much indeed, everyone. It's been a very the discussion is just kind of blossomed. I know everybody's deeply involved in it here. It's very personal to everybody. It seems to me that, you know, it's great to have these great directives from government, but ultimately it's going to be about connecting with communities, and that's how I think we're going to kind of make the changes in order to kind of facilitate people to be more empowered ultimately with what goes on around them. Because as you say, it's about somehow finding the sweet spot really between what we need as a government. I'm sure it's going to be something. It's a developing story, isn't it? And I'd like to thank Mellis, Haward of Archio. Thank you very much indeed for coming on today. Oliver Bulleid of London CLT, Community Land Trust, and Russell Curtis of RCKa. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much.